Welcome to the Mindset Coach podcast, brought to you by the Mindset Coach Academy. I'm Lara Young, your host and Master Certified Coach. Whether you're a seasoned coach or just starting your coaching career, this podcast is your go-to resource for all things mindset, coaching, and personal development. Each week, we bring you expert insights, practical strategies, and inspirational stories to help you become the best coach you can be. Our guests range from leading industry professionals to successful mindset coaches who share their secrets for creating lasting change. Plus, I'll be answering your burning questions and sharing tips from our ICF and multi-accredited Mindset Coach certification program. So, if you're ready to elevate your coaching game, stay tuned and let's dive into today's episode. This question comes from a coach who specialises in working with neurodivergent leaders. And the coach is concerned about how do you coach someone who, for example, has ADHD to focus on the problem and not have their responses to questions in coaching lead to more problems rather than coming up with solutions. And actually, I think this is a challenge that is faced by many coaches, if not most coaches, in that the presenting problem is kind of like a Russian doll. Our client comes to us with a problem or something that they want to improve, and it's like the big Russian doll. We start to ask questions of our client and the next doll in is revealed, and so on and so forth until, we've got this row of Russian dolls. And that's actually part of the art of really effectively questioning our clients so that we are working as coaches on the problem and not the problem. Now, of course, if you're working with a client who seems to be coming up with a whole raft of issues, a whole raft of challenges, and not being solution focused, then what we need to do is orient the client towards a solution. Now, the first part of the process, of course, is to make sure that we have actually taken the time to get all of those issues out on the table. And this requires patience from you as a coach. It requires the ability to make sure that all of those interdependent or seemingly interdependent issues are brought out. The client has laid them out for you, and it's almost like a visual depiction or representation of all of those interdependent issues. Now, one way to really help people to just assimilate this and to see it visually is to actually use your whiteboard function on if you're using Zoom or if you're using Google Teams. And if you're in person, you can actually use a mini whiteboard just to kind of mind map all of those different interconnected issues. Because once the client can actually see them out there on paper, it does help to then ring fence them, to categorize them, to further discuss them in a way that is disassociated slightly from the client themselves, so they can work more objectively on the problem and come to a resolution. So it's really important to guide the conversation with this client towards a more solution-focused approach. Okay, so we're going to use empathy, and we're going to hear those problems, but we're also going to be redirecting and reorienting our client towards that solution state, that solution focus. So what we can do is we can help our client to reframe the problems. So you can see them as help your client to see them as being opportunities for growth and learning. What is it that you can learn from this problem? The learning of which will equip you to be more effective in the future. Now, this can really help your client to open up the mind towards problem solving rather than being as part of a saboteur or a sabotaging behavior that the client engages in because they think that the problem is insurmountable. You can also break down the issues, okay? So what we want to do is to then take those presenting problems or problem and then break it down into smaller, more manageable parts, okay? And this can make it much easier to focus on and address one at a time. And often what that can mean too is that we have a domino effect. In the one thing, we talk about the one thing that's going to have the biggest impact. You can help your client to identify in the solving of which problem will you ultimately solve more than that problem? Okay, so that's the domino effect. When we solve the biggest domino, then the other dominoes can naturally sometimes just fall to the wayside. Also, you can shift your focus for the client to their strengths and past successes. So you can ask questions like, can you think of a time when you successfully navigated a similar challenge? What worked for you then? Inherently, your client will have some resources internally. They will have experiences where they've overcome challenges in the past. And sometimes it's a matter of reminding them of these, getting them to remind themselves of them as they're telling them to you, so that then you can align the strategies, the resources, the tools they use then to help them to see that they can actually apply this to the problems at hand. As I said, with visual aids, with people who are neurodivergent, with ADHD, it becomes a brilliant reference point. So flowcharts are really useful as well, because it's a very clear structure for thinking through problems and solutions. And if you use the same structure with each problem to come to a solution, it will start to become very familiar as a process with your client. And then when they're familiar with something, they're much more comfortable and receptive to it, and they can start to actually lead the process themselves. Also, make sure that you are encouraging your client to come up with ideas and come up with a range of ideas, no matter how unrealistic they may appear at the time. We want to encourage creativity in problem solving, because we never know when that brilliant idea for solving that problem is going to come, and where it's going to come from. So really encouraging that. So when we're looking at options, if you're using the GROW model, when we're looking at the potential actions that the client can take, do take time over exploring those different options. Now, if you're finding that your client is saying, well, that won't work or that won't work, ask them, can you tell me a specific time when you've used that strategy and it hasn't worked? Okay. Some people will experience resistance to doing something because it's unfamiliar, rather than because they've actually experienced it not working in practice. You also want to help your client to really prioritize their challenges. So, where is their locus of control? What can they control, and what do they feel is outside of their control? When we start to focus on the things that our client can control, they feel much more on board, much more able, much more empowered to be able to take action. Then what we can do, of course, is we can look at the areas they perceive to be outside of their control and maybe even reframe them so the client sees that they do have some actual control over that situation. We also want to make sure that we're setting small, achievable goals. The client agrees to those, and that really can create momentum, and it can create that forward momentum, and that those little hits of dopamine that are required to keep interest and motivation high. So when you have small successes, get the dopamine hit, you're much more likely to want to continue on. And also just equipping your client with some skills around emotion regulation and resilience, maybe some mindfulness or meditation, anything that's going to work for them. And again, every client is different. We work with the individual in front of us. We really want to help our client to be in the best state for clear thinking and for having those emotions regulated. Do you know what this may also mean? Identifying when your client is at their peak in terms of being creative and thinking of solutions. It could also be from a chronobiology point of view that you want to map out with your client when they are in the peak state to be able to having coaching sessions and taking action on the tasks that you agree to during that session. Also, it may be beneficial for the client to seek the support of others, whether it's colleagues, mentors, or other professionals. And remember too where your boundaries lie. Remember too where your areas of expertise lie as well. And refer out where you need to, ensuring that your clients have a support network. Now, if you are a specialist neurodivergent coach specializing, for example, in ADHD, you may have a Facebook group or some kind of community where your clients can get together and congregate and share support in that environment. Also, the thing that you want to do, and this underpins all coaching, is just use that reflective listening skill, really being able to validate your clients' questions and concerns and to help them to really just have that level of rapport and trust with you. Because when they have that, they're much more willing to open up and also to be open to new perspectives and ideas and solutions. So I think the key here is being able to be patient, be understanding, use your reflective skills, let your client get all of those things out, make them visible, make them visual, so that you can agree to work on the areas at a time in a very solution-focused way. Are you looking for ongoing support and resources to continuously grow as a coach? Join our coaching membership at the Mindset Coach Academy. As a member, you'll have access to exclusive training opportunities, live Q&A sessions, coaching supervision, and a library of resources to help you stay at the top of your game. It's a fantastic way to stay connected, inspired, and informed. Head over to mindsetcoachacademy.com to join our thriving community today. As a coach working with clients who are neurodivergent or even clients that aren't, there is a technique that you can use, particularly if you've got a group environment that's associated with your coaching. So, for example, that may be that you've got a Facebook group or another type of community where your clients can get together and interact with one another. And it also helps you because it provides you with a forum where you can support your clients in making things happen. Now, one of the strategies that we know works very well is body doubling. So this is where you work alongside your client or clients for additional accountability and support. And so what does this look like in your coaching practice? Well, you can start creating some co-working sessions. Now, these are sessions where you are not coaching in the sessions. You come along to the session where you and the clients both work on tasks and you do it simultaneously. They can be in person or virtual, but the idea is that just having another person present while you are working can make focus increase and also boost productivity. And so what you can do is you can set up these sessions. It's very simple. We run them in the Coaches Success Society, where we work on tasks for 30 minutes and then check on progress, where you can do an hour or an hour and a half, whatever time zone that you've got, time frame that you've got. And it's just that really great way of establishing at the outset what tasks people are going to be working on and then having that check-in. You also need to make sure in this process that you're setting really clear goals and timelines. So at the very beginning of the session, you're going to set clear, specific goals for what the client wants to achieve, and then break down the larger tasks into smaller and more manageable tasks. So you may actually ask your client, what are 3 tasks that you want to complete during our session today? During the session, it's also useful to have frequent check-ins, okay? And this helps you to provide encouragement where needed and maintain focus and accountability. And you can do that if you've got an hour-long session, you can maybe check in once at the half-hour point, or if you're running a 90-minute session, you can do it every half an hour. And you just make that clear at the start that you're going to be checking in after that time period and getting a little bit of feedback as to how people are going and then going back to work. Remember, these co-working sessions are for you to work on your own business, on your own tasks as well. They are not for you to continue the coaching process. The other thing that can also be very, very useful is to make sure that you help the client to create an environment where the session is going to be very useful. So what you can do at the start of a co-working session is to say something simple like, before we start, let's each take a few minutes to organize a workspace so that we have everything that we need, okay? Making sure that everyone's got everything that they need to be productive. It can really help to get them organized and to set up a future routine or a future environment which is really conducive to productivity. You're also going to then provide that reinforcement and encouragement at the end of the session as well. Provide some feedback about how the session went, how did they feel the session went, what did they accomplish. Acknowledge that, and then of course encourage people to come along to the next session if you're hosting these as a regular forum for your clients and, for this group. You can also, as I mentioned earlier, start to use those visual and organizational tools. So you can have a timer going. You can just use your phone and set a time. Ask the people who are on the call to do the same thing. You may also use visual aids, even a calendar, those kind of things. And it really does help just to set that pace. And remember, if we're given shorter bursts of time to get things done in, we tend to accomplish more. We tend to be more productive, knowing that there is a shorter time frame in which to work. Also, take time at the end of each session. So you can either do it as a live question, or you can do a little survey, create a Google form, and just ask everyone to reflect on what worked well and what didn't in terms of their own productivity and their own workflow. And you can just ask something like, how did you feel about today's session? Is there anything we could do differently to make it more effective next time? So they're just some tips that I would give for creating, I guess, a body doubling strategy, a strategy where you're co-working. And again, whether that's for clients who are neurodivergent or not, it can be a really, really powerful thing to do. And it's something certainly that I do with my students in the Mindset Coach certification, and also what we do in the Coaches Success Society. One other thing I wanted to share before I wrap up the episode is just some solution-focused coaching questions, because when we're really helping our client to move towards a solution during the session, we want to make sure that the client has clarified the problem and then that we're guiding them forward. So here's a list of questions that you can ask, and you'll also be able to download this below the episode. So in order to clarify the problem, we want to ask questions such as, what exactly is the challenge that you're facing right now? This helps your client to be really specific about what's going on for them. Can you describe a recent situation where the issue came up? Again, this is important because it contextualizes the situation for us, and then we can use some reframing if it's appropriate to do so. And it can also help us to recognize the frequency with which this problem is occurring. We also want to know, how is this problem impacting you or your work or your family or whatever context? What have you already tried to address the problem? And what will it look like when this problem is solved? Again, we want our client to imagine, to visualize, what will it be like? What will be different? What will change when the problem has a resolution? As we move towards a solution, we can ask our clients questions like, what small steps can you take immediately to start addressing this issue? Can you think of a time in the past when you successfully dealt with a similar challenge? What did you do? Again, this is asking our client to really think about it. What have they done in the past? How has this been resolved? Who can support you in this process, and how can they help? What resources or skills do you have that can help you solve this problem? And imagine that you've overcome this challenge. What's different now, and how did you get there? Again, we're asking our client to really think about those solutions in a future-paced kind of way. So we also, I think, really want to help our clients to lean into creativity when it comes to problem solving and it comes to finding solutions. So here are 10 questions that you can ask, which are really designed to encourage creativity. If there were no limitations, what would be your ideal solution to this problem? What's the most unconventional idea you can think of to tackle this issue? How would someone you admire approach this problem? What would you do if you were not afraid of failing? Can you think of 3 completely different ways to address this challenge? What would a child suggest as a solution to this problem? If you had to solve this problem in 24 hours, what would you do? How can you combine 2 or more different ideas to create a unique solution? What if you approach this problem from a completely different perspective? And what's one thing you've never tried before that might help in this situation? Now, these questions, they're not designed to be asked all 10 in a row. Choose the one or the ones that you like the most, because they're really designed to break out of that conventional thinking and to really stimulate those creative and out-of-the-box solutions. So when it comes to clients who are neurodivergent, and there are some other questions that you can ask, which really helps for you and them to understand maybe where the blocks are. So questions like, what strategies have you found helpful in staying organised and focused in the past? What specific aspects of this task or situation are most challenging for you? How can we break this goal down into smaller, more manageable steps? What activities or environments help you feel the most productive and engaged? And what kind of support or tools do you think would make it easier to stay on track? This is really about blending a combination of leveraging strengths, identifying practical steps, and exploring supportive resources and environments. I hope that that's helped you today in navigating solution-based coaching, finding solutions to problems, and oftentimes problems within problems. We talked about the Russian doll effect, and that you'll apply these in your own coaching practice. As always, I'd love to hear your feedback. And if you do have any questions that you'd like answered on an upcoming episode of the Mindset Coach podcast, please do fill out the form and we'll come back to you with your answer very soon. Bye for now. That wraps up today's episode of the Mindset Coach podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and informative as I did. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow coaches. Your support helps us reach more people and continue to bring top-notch content every week. Remember, you can always learn more about our ICF and multi-accredited Mindset Coach certification program, our coaching membership, and other training opportunities by visiting mindsetcoachacademy.com. Thank you for tuning in and keep striving to become the best coach you can be. Until next time, this is Lara Young signing off. Stay motivated and keep transforming lives.